All right. Hello, everybody. We are so excited for the number of people that are joining us for this discussion today. It is great to see people from all over the world. I saw Ireland, London, Indiana, Michigan, Orlando. We've got Colorado people. Oh, Winter Park. I love Winter Park. Oh, no, never mind. Winter Park, Colorado is what I was talking about. Anyway, if you guys are here for the CEU, please make sure at kind of the 50-minute mark that you find the CEU form that is in the PDF. That's our version of code words. I find it super distracting to stop in the middle and give out code words. So our version of code words is finding the, hi, Emily, we're in Evergreen too. I find it distracting to have to stop. So the CEU form is in our PDF. Please fill that out and you should get a PDF emailed to you right away. So just quick introductions. I'm Rosalie Prendergast, a board certified behavior analyst. We have a small practice called Eclipse Therapy in Evergreen, Colorado. We work a lot in schools and homes and in the community. Go ahead, Katy.
I am Katy Thomas. I'm also a board certified behavior analyst. I don't know, what else can I say today? I am trying a new location today to avoid the disruptions from the animals, so wish me luck.
We're wishing, and now I want to introduce our very special guest, Terra Vance, who is an Autistic Advocate who's joining us. So Terra, say a quick hello and however much introduction you'd like to give.
Hi, everyone. I'm Terra Vance. I don't do cameras live. I just can't. So I'm just a voice today. I am the CEO of NeuroClastic. We are the world's largest autistic-led nonprofit. And I have a master's in industrial and organizational psychology, a specialization in diversity, inclusion, and poverty dynamics. And I spend 365 days a year, every single day, deeply involved in the autistic community. And so most important issues to me are racial equity and communication rights for non-speaking autistic people. And I am of Indigenous and Romani heritage. So that's me. Thank you for having me.
We're super excited. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to jump into our shared purpose matrix. Obviously we are here, and how's that looking in terms of size? Is that looking good, Katy?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Oh, and I forgot. Please make sure if you're here for the CEU, you don't have to ask questions in the chat, but please do at least say hello, just so that I have record of you being here. So we are, as a team, going to do our best to answer all the questions in the chat. We want this to be an open, free-flowing discussion between all of us. So here comes our Autistic Advocate meets BCBAs. Come listen here, ask and apply to enhance our services for all individuals. With our shared purpose matrix, I do want to make sure, feel free to participate if you want to. If you don't want to participate, certainly don't have to, but I just find that the shared purpose matrix allows us all to talk about what's important, the stuff that might be hard, and give us a sense of what we want to accomplish in this discussion today. So if I say who or what is important to you in our shared purpose today, and to me, I'm going to just start it off. I'm going to say the conversation. I'm going to say the field of ABA, autistic. Autistics are important to me. I'm going to say actually all individuals we serve. What else? Katy, got anything, Terra? Who or what's important to you in our shared purpose?
Honesty. That is always my number one.
Yes, honesty. Oh, my clients listening. Totally. I think something else that's important. Oh, open-minded. You just stole it right out of my mouth, Tammy. Open-mindedness is really important to me today. I think another thing that is extremely, vulnerability.
Dignity. I saw some throughout.
Dignity. Respect. Yeah, students, parents, learning. Oh, look at that. Understanding. Caregiver, integrity. Thank you. You guys are taking all the words for me today. Assent and consent.
They're coming in fast. I can't even keep up.
Admitting when we're wrong. Oh my gosh. Yes. Gaining insight. You guys are typing so fast. Look at, intersectionality. Saying, oh my goodness, I spelled that one right too. Learning. Comfort zone. Nice. Look at that list. What an amazing list of things that are important to this group that is all here together. Now, if we head over here to our, loyalty. Totally. And I'll try to keep going and adding things. But if I move over to this lower left-hand side, collaboration for sure. What inside stuff? We're talking mental experiencing. We're talking emotions. We're talking rules. We're talking, oh my gosh, I'm going to try to keep up with this. Katie, you want to talk about the other one I type dependability? Amazing. Hearing. Yes. Different viewpoints. Okay. Oh, awesome. All right. We're getting some
I think
of that.
we're over. Yeah, some of us are jumping over to the other side now.
All right. Now we're over on the other side. All right. So we're talking about denials. Yeah. Scheduling conflicts. Oh my gosh. Our own histories. Amazing. Yep. And feelings, those emotions that show up around our history. I have so much emotional junk that shows up about my history and things that I've done in the past. Stubbornness, fear. Oh, Siri's talking too. Judgment. Yeah, look at all this stuff. Pliance rather than tracking. And for non-behavior analytic people, pliance is when you do things for socially mediated consequences. Tracking is when you actually look at what the effect of that is. Is that workable? Is it not workable? Oh my goodness. Burnout. I can't even keep up. Burnout.
I saw someone through like being vulnerable.
Pride. Yep. Vulnerable.
There's a feeling of vulnerability.
Feeling vulnerable. Those, I think for me, a big thing that shows up is that, ableism. Look at everybody go. Like I can't even get my, that's all right. We're going with your ideas today. Kara, thanks. Siri has ideas too. Lack of exposure. Yeah, look at all of these. Defensiveness. I'm going to go right out there. And just everybody mostly on this crowdcast probably already knows I'm not a very good speller. So just go ahead and sound out everything that I write. Loss of control. I'm going to say ego. Biases. Totally.
Privileged perspective. I see someone throughout.
Privilege, perspective. Yeah, imposter syndrome, being overwhelmed. Oh my gosh. Overwhelmed. Oh. Trauma, for sure. Trauma, those trauma responses. Trauma. Inflexibility shows up. I'm going to say not helpful rules. I know I still got a lot of those in there. All right, what an amazing list. And if I missed you, it's in the chat, and I will try to go back through the chat and get everything kind of in here so that we have kind of our full shared purpose matrix. If we jump up to the top, what behaviors will I see or hear you using to get relief from this inside stuff, from this stuff that shows up and gets in the way of our shared purpose here today? when I saw somebody say cultural differences, I hope I got that one. What yucky stuff shows up for me, and I think sometimes you might see me arguing a point. Arguing like, I am right. This is what I want. I'm going to argue this point to the death, argue to the death. Disengage. You might see or
I would
hear
say
me.
it swings the other way. Yeah. That disengaged or being super quiet, not speaking up.
Yeah. Oh,
Yep, shut
stonewalling,
down.
shutting down, avoidance. Yeah. Ooh, seeking insight. Yeah. Not all away moves to get relief are not helpful. Seeking insight from others. Nice. Yeah. Avoidance. Totally. Procrastination. Oh, I talking about racial equality. Yeah. As being the most, yeah. Talking about that. I cannot type fast enough. Escape. Procrastination. Oh my gosh. Hi, Bryant. Avoidant behavior. Yep. Off-color humor. Oh, that sarcasm comes in there sometimes, doesn't it? Ooh. Befriend people on Facebook. I was going to go with Facebook scrolling or games too. Wordle has been like the biggest relief move for a lot of people lately, and maybe that's a helpful one sometimes. Yeah, invalidating lived experiences. Wow. Yeah. Digging in your heels. Yep. Books, resources. Oh, I'm an overproducer, complaining. Oh, goodness. Going
Shopping.
out
I
shopping.
like that one.
Yep. Venting. I'm going to throw yoga at the bottom. Yoga. Sometimes you got to do a little yoga to get a little relief from that stuff that shows up inside. Yeah. This chat today, and actually, Tara, thanks for saying that. I'm going to move that over here too. This chat today, oh, the chat is on fire, but I'm going to say this chat that we're having today with Tara is a behavior that you'll see or hear me using to move towards what's important to this group today. So, oh, self-care, a glass of wine. This chat with Tara. All right, so let's move over. Yeah, asking questions, withdrawing. I promise I'll go back through and get all of these on our shared purpose matrix. Listening to music, coloring, and yet self-reflection, I think, could go in both too. But let's get our kind of, how are we moving? What behaviors will we see or hear people using to move towards? And I'm seeing self-reflection. I'm seeing more resources and feedback. Totally. Listening to autistics.
Asking more questions just jumped out at me because that's one that I know I have to get myself out of that uncomfortable zone and sometimes ask questions that, when I'm not sure I should be or what the answer is going to be.
Yep. Active listening and responding to people. Yeah. I mean, sometimes even asking, put your ego aside, just asking a question can be so uncomfortable. Pausing before, advocate pausing. Wow. You guys are way faster than me today, but I will be okay with that. Advocating, listening, collaboration, listen. Oh my gosh. Sharing control. Put your ego aside. These are amazing. Begin to pay attention to cultural differences, seek out interest groups and SIGs. Yeah. Validating perspectives. Yep. Consent. Oh my gosh, guys, this is the problem. I didn't turn my Google. Anyway, now there's going to be all sorts of red lines that show up, and that's okay. We'll live. All right. There we go. Okay. Amazing. Look at all of these. Java behavior. Yes. Let's get some research going, huh? Let's talk to let's publish research that doesn't work too. Right. Let's talk about the things that we've done that haven't worked. Using time management. Sure. Awesome. Productive confrontation. Yep. Yep. If something isn't going well, we've got to talk about it. We've got to come to an end point. Yeah. Let's see. Restating the conversation for clarity. Yeah. Clarification. Awesome. All right. Wow. That was an experience. I do not think I've had one quite like that.
So is that a whole page?
It's like 2 pages. Mindfulness of your own behavior. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to throw that. Mindfulness. Your own behavior. Yeah. And more advocating. For sure. Okay. As a group, as this group that's here today with this shared purpose, is everybody going to have a chance to kind of notice this stuff showing up as we go through this really collaboration and communication, our conversation about our ethics and what they mean? I know I for sure will. I've already noticed a lot just from listening to others. Katy, do you have a chance? Will you have a chance to notice?
I hope so. Yep.
Terra, you too?
Yes, I'll do my best.
Absolutely. Me too. Me too. All right. So, as we get started, the first kind of ethics code that we pulled out was about cultural responsiveness and diversity behavior. And I pulled from Terra and I pulled these together. Terra, did a great job thinking about which ones would fit best for these ethics codes. So I'm going to read this out loud, and then I'm going to read the ethics code. And then we've got some questions, but let's have this be a lively discussion. And, if people have other things to say, please feel free to throw them in the chat. So imagine how it feels to live with executive dysfunction when you cannot imagine how long something will take, what steps are involved, what the outcomes might be, or how to get there. The chance of everything feels like 50-50. It makes everything feel like a coin toss between survival and disaster. So when I pulled the ethics code, the first one that jumped out at me was cultural responsiveness and diversity. Behavior analysts actively engage in professional development activities to acquire knowledge and skills related to cultural responsiveness and diversity. They evaluate their own biases and ability to address the needs of individuals with diverse needs, backgrounds, age, disability, ethnicities, gender, expression, identity, immigration status, marital relationship status, national origin, race, religion, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status. Behavior analysts also evaluate biases of their supervisees and trainees, as well as their supervisees and trainees' ability to address the needs of individuals with diverse backgrounds. That is like a packed ethical statement. So I think thinking my first question was like, how do we engage in professional development surrounding that? I mean, there's so much to learn. And Terra, I'd love to hear your opinion. Like, how do we engage in that type of development surrounding these cultural competencies and responsiveness, more importantly?
There's even cognitive neuroscience to back that. It's the basal ganglia that is responsible for bias, and it gets lazy and it needs to be worked out. And the way to overcome your prejudice and bias is exposure. And so you may have moved at some point, and the people around you, the racial composition of people around you changed. And you used to think everybody looked the same. And then when you start to notice and learn and get to know people, you realize how different everyone looks. That is because your basal ganglia was just underdeveloped. And that is something that we can work on. So exposure is the way to overcome your biases. And when it comes to neurodiversity and having structurally different brains, and autistic people are not all the same. So when a lot of what I'll say is generalizing today, but just keep in mind that these things might or might not apply to every single autistic person out there, because, you know, we do have different brains from the majority and also from each other. And that's substantiated in research. But we do tend to have a community with its own cultures, norms, nuances. And today, when we were going through some of the things like the Matrix at the beginning, and it's of asking you to think about things that are just totally automatic to autistic people. It's asking you to be in your own mind and perspective, as opposed to rather more groupthink. And we're always in our mind, or we tend to be in our mind and perspective and our own values naturally. So that seemed pointless and redundant in my perspective, because I was thinking, why would you instruct people? It's like saying you have to breathe. You know, you just do that automatically. But then I realized, you know, that is a big difference, because the majority wouldn't be autistic. And there was another thing. There was in the shared purpose a list of things that I said, if autistic people saw that, you'd have like a riot in your audience, because they were kind of demands. They weren't hard demands, but they were like, be open to listening and things like that. And as soon as you tell autistic people that they have to do things that they would, you know, it would already be part of their values, they're like, I sent a meme. I can't.
She did. So I was feeling uncomfortable not doing a shared purpose matrix. And then, so what I did, because I was uncomfortable, I was like, oh, I got to put like rules around how we can have a flexible, functional conversation. And then that list of rules ended up not being helpful. Right. So, like, you know, I was overthinking instead of, you know, thinking from individual lens, I was thinking as a collective, which it sounds like one of the differences that you're highlighting, Terra, is that that's already kind of in that perspective, and that's something that maybe that neurotypical people miss. Is that kind of what I'm hearing, or am I missing that?
Yeah, well, it's just a difference in how we process. So those things would just kind of be obvious, and telling, you know, if you went into a restaurant and the waiter told you not to wipe your mouth on the curtains, they're new and they're expensive. You you would never do that. It wouldn't even occur to you to do that. But as soon as that waiter tells you that, it's put that thought in your head. You know, why would you tell me that? And you're offended, and you start thinking, you know, I hate these curtains anyway. They're disgusting. And, you know, why would you tell me? And you want to wipe your mouth on the curtains at that point, because it was just obvious. So I think that was, it's just these differences in processing that autistic people and non-autistic people really need to help each other, like take the time to break these down and document them, so that we can effectively, and I can't do this on my own. I can't do this with a giant group of autistic people, because like when we set our own things up, they look totally different. There was another larger piece of a matrix that had a lot of feelings things on it. And I'm thinking, how can people answer this? You would need like 45 hours to process that many emotions.
Yeah.
But those things are automatic for most people. It's just that we don't really prioritize even our own emotions, not those primary ones that people talk about a lot. They take a long time for a lot of us to process. So we don't prioritize, I guess, our psychological comfort is very low on our list. And we also love to deep dive. And so that's another thing that's just kind of a difference, where most people like sound bites and we want all the information. So just things like that, that we need to understand about each other and how we're so different. And I have some autistic friends in the audience. Can you say hi if you? I see Sarah Salvaji Hernandez is the Autistic OT on social media, and you should totally follow her. That's one of my best friends in the audience there. But I think
Totally.
there's some more here too. If you want to out yourself,
Yeah, totally do if you want to. For sure. So I hear you say we need to ask those things, or like before we think that that's like the norm, we should probably take this is great to have a big crew. We should ask about that. Is that what you're saying, Terry? I mean, we can't make generalizations like everybody's going to appreciate this or everybody isn't going to like those rules, but really take some time to ask that question and have that discussion around it.
I think that I think what I'm saying is that it would be a great idea to do CEUs like this with lots of autistic people all the time.
Yeah.
And to break things down like this. And it's kind of exhausting because we're all speaking English in this group right now, but it's totally different languages. And we both have to adjust. Oh, I see too in the audience. Totally follow them on social media too. But yeah, we need to do things like this all the time because you'll learn some today, hopefully, and maybe get some ideas about where to go to do some more research. But we need to do this all the time so that it's like learning a different language. And I am better at explaining things when someone takes the time to like I said, things that seem obvious to me are not to you, and things that seem obvious to you are not at all to me. And so we have to be really metacognitive or think out loud. I always tell people that's the first thing with autistic people to help them understand you is to narrate your thoughts. And autistic people tend to narrate their own thoughts out loud or type them if they use AAC.
I'm going to interrupt.
Something.
Yeah, go ahead, Katie.
I was going to say something Tara just said there really jumped out at me, and it's us trying to explain our perspective to people who are autistic, and for them to explain to us kind of their perspective, and to take the time, what I'm hearing, to have that kind of back and forth of sharing our perspectives. And I think what that reminds me of, that I think Rosalie and I know we try to do so much, is trying to create a relationship where it's not on this hierarchy of the therapist and the client, and I'm kind of in charge of you, and I'm here to help you. I really see my role as we're kind of in this together, and we're here to help and to learn from each other. This isn't just like a one direction learning experience where I'm giving my client, the knowledge and the skills. I'm really learning from them too. And so that kind of concept of just sharing both ways just really kind of stood out to me. And please let me know if I had a huge miss on something you said there, Tara.
No, that was right. In fact, I sent a graphic, but I don't think it made the cut, and it said power differential aversion. And that was that was a thing, autistic people find power differentials quite aversive. And a lot of times non-autistic people who tend to automatically do social hierarchies, we don't. So your CEOs and your janitors, your infants and your elders, everybody is like they're on their own merits. There's no I don't think we naturally rank people and feel those authority hierarchies, and we don't like authority. So anything where an autistic person feels that they are not helpful and mutually beneficial in a relationship is just not a relationship for an autistic person. And so, yeah, that's a good one.
Go ahead, Terry.
I was just going to say, and how do we evaluate our own biases? You won't even be able to see them until you're like immersed in autistic culture. And I can't even do a good job describing them until you narrate how you're perceiving so that I can say, oh, well, here's the difference. And And like I said, I don't speak for every autistic person, but I don't personally know anyone who interacts more with the autistic community than I do. So I try very hard to make sure that my own way of experiencing is not the only one that I'm speaking from, but kind of trying to give you a majority perspective. And NeuroClastic is a publication. We have, I think, about 600 or 700 contributors currently. So that's a lot of autistic people who I've edited everything that we've published myself. So that's a lot of deep dives into other autistic people's brains. So I try very hard to speak from a communal perspective, but also want to recognize that, you know, we do all have differences.
Yeah, and it sounds like languaging is really how we evaluate those biases. If we don't language together, how do we notice those, and how do we, I guess, then language with each other about it? You know, which includes kind of our supervisees and trainees. We don't know what people are thinking in their head until they say it out loud. And then, yeah, every community has standards, norms based on mutual experiences. Of course, there will be exceptions, but norms. Yeah, and so how do those norms become? You know, they become based on what we language or how we interact with each other, our community. Can you please put the publication name in the chat?
Sure.
That'd be great. There we go. So kind of as we move forward, kind of thinking about this ethics code and thinking about how we can do better to evaluate our biases. And I think, Terry, you already said it. It's talking, right? It's having autistic people come on and talk with you, talk to us, hear what people have to say, so that we can identify those biases and then also get ourselves some exposure, right?
Yes.
Put ourselves in places, right? If you don't provide exposure, you don't know. It's just not there.
Yes, and a big barrier is that autistic people love blunt and highly direct language because we have to, because we understand that we do have very different ways of being. And so we try to be as direct as possible, but that ends up being most non-autistic people communicate up to 93% of communication is nonverbal. So your tone, your body language, even your exclamation points and your emojis when you're doing online communication, all of those things, the things between the lines for most people have more meaning than your actual words. And we love blunt for ourselves and others. And for us, almost all of what we are communicating is in our actual words. And so if you're looking at our facial expressions and tones, and especially our tone in writing, your gut instinct might tell you that we're being confrontational or rude. And you'll really know when we are. We'll probably tell you I'm being confrontational and rude on purpose, like that blunt, if that's what we want from you. So yeah, just realizing that we don't do value judgments also as much as most people. So there's no implied you're bad if we point something out. We're just saying, we are implying this might be unhelpful, but we're not trying to be rude or aggressive. Yes, the people call us arrogant and egoistic when we're really just trying to explain something to be helpful, because they misunderstand our tone. So just getting used to us, and we're a lot of fun and we're funny. And I think the best education, we put out a lot of, I think, valuable content on social media and on our platform. But if you read the comments, most of our comments from autistic people, you'll see that we're not just speaking to our own experience. Like, we have so much in common. We speak to each other very differently. And you eventually will just pick up our language and get it. But it just takes a lot of time, like learning any language would, I guess.
Yeah, I think a couple of people I think Melissa was saying, so our ethics code doesn't address like diversity and experiences, and focuses a lot on kind of bigger picture, overt issues. And I think Lisa just said that too, in terms of, we just, sometimes you can get stuck, right? Like, our ethics doesn't say, go do these things, go try these things, go get exposure to these differences. It kind of just gives you this framework to think about. Well, all right, well, like, now how do we do that? How do we get that experience? How do we, and I think Lisa said too, thinking about, like, we talk to a lot of other people, we language with other people, and they language back to us about that person. We don't necessarily sit down and language with the autistic person we're working with. Like, what should we do there? We need to do more of that languaging with that person, so that we don't so that we do learn their language, their individual language, from their lens, not from somebody else's lens. Am I hearing that right from the people in the audience? Am I translating that correctly? I hope.
I think so, yeah. It's just, yeah, it's all about exposure all the time. And there are a question at NeuroClastic, do you also help us to address microaggressions that we may not be aware of? Yes, every day. And it's not, you probably won't find a lot of like, here is a list of microaggressions, but we will break those things down one soundbite at a time. And so it needs to be a long-term, like, forming a relationship and being involved. We call the autistic community autistic people leading and being centered, and our allies and accomplices out there who may be neurokin. We call, like, other autistics, ADHDers, OCD, dyslexics, lots of things we consider neurokin, but they're not autistic, but we have a lot in common often. And so the community is based on the shared understanding that we have a lot of different ways of communicating and just giving each other the benefit of the doubt. And yeah, sometimes it's hard because we've been invalidated a lot. Sometimes people actually are being confrontational, but that is to them punching up, because they see you as having a lot more privilege. And so just give them space for that, because they have valid reasons to be angry, and they don't personally know you. So just give them space to express anger sometimes. But just come back, come back to us and read more. We have an amazing community. And I see validate perspectives. I want to say another thing on this is to validate autistic people. It looks very different. Saying things like "good job" and "you're a great writer" feel like grooming and insults to a lot of us. Compliments on looks and things like that, we would validating autistic people is usually more along the lines of, this is helpful to me. It helped me to understand that I used to do this, but I won't do it anymore. Or I've never thought of something this way. Thank you for helping me see that. That is a great way to validate autistic people. Yeah. And that's another, bring them into our world. Yes, because that helps us when you narrate your thoughts and perspective to understand better, like, where everybody else is, so we can do better at creating this like translation manual that's a living thing through our online communities.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that brings us into, that was so well said. Like, thinking about awareness, like if I read kind of the emotional impact of executive dysfunction, cannot predict outcomes for big decisions, cannot hold enough information in working memory to feel sure of anything, cannot arrange steps in mind to be able to make an informed choice, cannot imagine possible scenarios, to plan for emotionally and practical. If we're walking around saying, oh my gosh, good job for you got those steps right, I mean, the amount of work that went into that for just a good job, you know, and the ongoing challenge of that, and that perspective, not even be able to see that language piece becomes that much more important. Talking about those things so that we know those things, so that they're out in the open, so that we can, you know, join, right? So that we can join. If we don't know, it's hard to join, kind of from both perspectives.
Yes. And so when you think of things like executive dysfunction, a lot of the assessment you do on autistic people and a lot of the interpretation that you do of their behaviors, and you think of things like argumentation, they might just not be able to see how you're getting from point A to B because they don't have the wiring to get them there, right? So you're thinking that they're being defiant or attention seeking or whatever. But what's really going on, and they're not arguing, they're asking you to build them a set of stairs so that they can get from point A to point B. And, you know, you might think they're making tons of excuses of why they can't do that. But remember that 50-50 thing at the beginning? Like, if you can't think of all the steps, everything feels like a disaster. And disasters do happen to us all the time. We're going to spill our food on ourselves because we have 87% of us have dyspraxia or motor planning deficits. So we're going to spill our food. We don't have great executive functioning. So we're going to forget very important things that you told us we should never forget. And we've repeated and set reminders, and it doesn't matter. We're still going to forget it. So instead of trying to train someone to have better executive functioning, why don't you just be their safety net and backup? You can't train a person who's blind to see or who's deaf to hear. Those are also neurological differences. And while executive functioning can be contingent somewhat on environmental things, like, you know, have you eaten? Have you slept? Did something bad happen that's distracted you? All of that. Those things can impact executive function a little bit, but only a little bit if you're not wired for it. So let's say most people have, you know, a brain with lots of two-lane roads going between all your cortices. And autistic people might have no road to some, or that it might have a path that's a detour that goes through several other things. And so they smell sounds and they taste words. But processing can be super different from us. And so an example of how we can be backup. Yes.
Yeah.
So you say that there is a field trip coming up to your client, and your client starts in like, oh, it's going to be so hot. Oh, it's going to blah, blah, blah. And you're thinking, why are you so negative all the time? Really, what they're thinking is disasters are going to happen. I don't know how to plan, and there's always a disaster. Like, I have to think 20 times a day, what season is this? Because I have no ability to like understand the passage of time, right? So I do panic and overplan and need to process everything. And what you can do is say, hey, 2 days before I'm going to come, I'm going to carry a backpack. It's going to have this, I'll have your EpiPen, your asthma inhaler. I'll have spare money. I'll hold your wallet for you. If you get overheated, we can go hang out in the arcade. I'll have a bunch of quarters. And that way, instead of like making them need to be responsible for things that they really can't, and then making them feel bad that they should do it because they're not wired to be able to, you're saying, I'm giving you the same level of support that everyone else has because their brains are wired to be able to think up all these things. And they can't trust that they're going to be able to regulate in the moment because they don't know they'll have supports for that. And they don't want to melt down in front of everybody and get embarrassed and get in trouble. It's humiliating and torturous to have a meltdown. So they need to know that you're their backup. They need support for their whole lives. You push for independence. You don't want to push for independence. You want to push for autonomy. And part of autonomy is having supports. You don't make a blind or a deaf person feel guilty that they are going to need supports. And you shouldn't do that to autistic people either. And you shouldn't tell them you don't need Braille or sign language, or you don't need an asthma inhaler. Just try harder to breathe. So we give them the supports because they have real disabilities and they need that. And autonomy, a part of autonomy and self-determination is having access to supports.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like that is a really huge shift that we need to make, is that autonomy piece, right? How do we move you towards you rather than trying to pull you towards us? We want you to be you. And how do we help you be the best you that you can be? And having a backup and having somebody that's got your back, that's such an important feeling that can develop that trust that then you might maybe feel comfortable to try things that you may never have experienced before.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, that's why we are so reluctant to try new things. We have been conditioned, programmed to, and it's not ABA just kind of exacerbates. If you do it wrong, it's going to exacerbate what society already does. It's program us to know that we're not going to have supports we need. And then we're going to be held responsible for the fallout, or when we inevitably mess up and we forget things and we become emotional and get dysregulated. So, and when I said build a set of stairs, this goes back to that metacognitive thing where you're thinking out loud. So if they say, I don't want to go, it's going to be too hot, and I don't like wearing my school uniform and blah, blah, blah. You're going to help them to get cognitively to the destination far in advance by thinking through every step out loud of what they can do and what you can help them to do, so that they start to see how they're borrowing the structure of your brain when you think out loud. You're giving them a routine of thought processes. So, yes, you can't change the fact that they are permanently disabled and that they will always struggle with executive dysfunction, but you can give them scaffolds to think through things by showing them the way that you think through them, because nobody ever does this for us. They just blame us for not being able to do things like everyone else. But if you're thinking out loud, you're right. it is going to be hot, but they have an arcade. Or let's go get online and let's look up and see what they have. So if it gets too hot, here's what we do. And I know that you get lost a lot, because we do. A lot of us have really poor spatial awareness and sense of geography, right? So we get nervous because we know we get lost, especially if we're dysregulated. So we don't know, we can't tell the difference between 5 minutes and 5 hours. We get lost all the time. So you're going to say, you're right, there's this, but I'm going to be with you. Let's go online and pull up the map so we can see, like, if we have to stand in line for 30 minutes for this thing, how close are we to a bathroom? Is there a vending machine with water on the on the way? You know, all these different things. So you're just go ahead and entertain their stress and show them how to think themselves through it in a way that does not make them seem like they're the problem, because they can't help it. They're not trying to argue. Their distress about things like that is just valid because they have an invisible disability.
That was so well said. I just want to, there were a couple of questions up here that I want you to hear. So
Sure.
Andrew, as a person who's often on the less empowered side of power imbalance, I know the value of like-minded spaces. Is there a place that autistic community prefer we stay out of, or places where it is best for neurotypical to come and listen only?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So you, if you try to join autistic spaces, they always are very explicit, like, do not join this space unless you're autistic. And that includes people who are self-identified as autistic, because a lot of us, you know, in the 80s, a level 3 autistic person would not have been diagnosed as autistic. So a lot of adults just aren't diagnosed, and it's very hard to get that diagnosis, and insurance usually won't cover it unless you've, like, had multiple hospitalizations and like arrests and things. It's almost impossible to get an adult diagnosis, so without privilege at least. So you can just, it's obvious when you're not supposed to be there. But there, anytime you go on social media, you look at the hashtag asking autistics or actually autistic. Somebody please put those in the chat so everybody can make sure. But yeah, just anywhere on social media, asking autistics, you can ask autistic people. We love sharing information. It's our love language. So it is not offensive to ask autistic people questions. Don't use person first language ever unless the person asks you to. Default to autistic instead of person with autism or on the spectrum, because that's like the first clue to autistic people that you're not listening to autistic people. So yeah, try autistic first, and unless they say, can you call me person with autism, but that's very few people in the adult community.
All right, and let's see. Tara's asking, is there a way we can reach out to our clients to advocate for themselves when they're being misunderstood? I think specifically, thank you for asking that question, Tara. I was just going to add on a little bit, especially with that, like, independence versus autonomy piece. I guess, how can we empower them to advocate?
Well, that's one of those things where you need to, autistic people are not manipulative. And when the other day I posted different reasons for tears, because not all behavior is communication. A lot of our behavior is not for you. We do not do everything as social communication. So it's just existing. Like, you have hair on your head, that's a trait. It's just the way you exist. It's not communicating any message to people. And it's the same with a lot of their behaviors. They're not intended for you to interpret as social communication. So, can you refresh the question? Because I got on my brain train and left the station too early.
That happens to me way too often. Yeah. Let me read Tara's question again. So is there a way we can reach our clients to advocate?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So to help them self-advocate, right?
Yeah. And I guess something that I think a lot about is that talking out loud, right? Like, if we're thinking from that neurotypical lens, that kind of complaining about, oh, it's too hot. Oh, it's, this is going to be hard to get to, or that has very different kind of meaning, than it may, for an autistic. So how do we, I guess, support in getting that difference to be heard and seen, especially by people who don't have the perspective of a lot of the people that came today? Does that make sense?
Yes. So you're going to get a ton of this just kind of tacitly answered when you spend a lot of time in the autistic community. Like you can get a lot of this, like I said, it's like learning a language. So the longer you spend in the community following autistic content creators and learning from autistic people, follow NeuroClastic. We have hundreds of contributors, and people say, oh, it's a bunch of mildly autistic, high functioning people. No, we have the same kind of disabilities as the people in Judge Rotenberg Center, hooked up to aversive shock devices and everything in between, all the way up to celebrity professors and influencers. So yes, join the autistic community by following those hashtags. Find lots of creators online and you'll start to naturally pick this up. But I would say that begin by knowing that autistic people are not, you have 4 motivations. We don't do things for our own comfort like most people. We also don't manipulate. So that attention seeking and is almost never accurate for us. It's super offensive that anybody thinks that to us, because if we wanted attention, we would say, I want your attention. We don't do things to get a rise out of you. And if you interpret us that way, that's probably, we can learn from people being maladaptive to pick up maladaptive behaviors, of course, but we're not naturally like that. Our communication is not intended for you usually. So if someone is showing you a need, assume that it is related to their disability and not willfulness or bad behavior, and that they have a real need they don't have the language to describe. So you want to make sure that you are exposing your autistic clients to the autistic community. And that doesn't mean, throw them in brutal Facebook groups or whatever, but just showing them, hey, look, I found this thing about executive dysfunction. Let's look at this. Does this feel true to you? Is this any of this like how you are? And then you've given them language to describe the way that their brain works that most of us didn't figure out until we got together with other autistic adults. And that makes a huge difference to like reduce just the trauma of existing in a world that is not in any way built for us. And so, yeah, showing them, hey, this is NeuroClastic just published a series of letters from underrepresented populations. So people from minoritized racial and ethnic identities, people from other countries, immigrants, and non-speaking autistic people, that are letters to children that are things they needed to hear when they were kids. And I honestly think that, yes, those things are going to be so valuable to children, and share it with your clients. but also you need to hear what autistic adults wish that other adults would have said to them as children. So yeah, that hopefully that was a good answer that helped.
Yeah, totally. It's finding that, and I know I'm going to sound cliche talking about we're on the happy medium approach channel, but it's finding that happy medium spot, right? Where we're immersing and providing enough exposure to gain that knowledge, but it's not so much exposure that it's like, let's dump you in the deep end, to where you're going to struggle even more. It's finding that sweet spot for each person that's going to support them in finding their voice of what works for them.
Yeah, and with that exposure thing, autistic people don't habituate to sensory stimuli like non-autistics. That is substantiated by evidence. So that, hearing a loud noise or a background sound, you eventually tune it out, or a bad smell, you eventually don't smell it anymore. That's not the same for autistic people. So so exposure theory, and it can actually magnify for them and get worse over time. And so you don't want to do those exposure methods. You want to always, every time, go for the accommodating methods. So not how can I make you get used to this thing, because you're really just helping autistic people to settle into learned helplessness when you do that. And that's cruel. And by the time they're adults, they have a phenomenon called social susceptibility, where they say yes to, they assume everyone else is more an authority on their own brains than they are. And they're always wrong, and they're a bad person for even thinking that their needs are valid, because their needs are very different. And so you don't want to do that to us. The world does that already. You don't want to exacerbate it. So you're going to find the ways that you can accommodate them. And sometimes the accommodation is opting out, doing a different thing. That kid doesn't need to do T-ball or basketball league if it's making them miserable. And even if their parents think that it's important, that they want their kids to be into sports, and their kids are too lazy and they need to do this and this and this. Instead, you need to be advocating to their parents that sometimes these things are really just making the kids miserable and feel othered. Other kids are bullying them for their differences. You can't control other children, but you can teach your kids that they don't need superficial relationships to be valid, and they don't need to excel at things that the quote average child does to be valid, and let them help them to know themselves and their neurology, and to know what accommodations they need, so that when they're adults, they're not so burnt out on life that they just shut down. 94% of autistic people with at least a bachelor's are chronically unemployed. Our average lifespan is 38, and the top 2 causes of death are suicide and heart disease, but it's not congenital. Non-congenital, meaning we don't have a natural heart defect or heart rhythm issue. It's from stress. And I'm 41, and most of my friends are dead. So that's something that people need to realize, that, and it was suicide every time, or maybe accidental overdose. And that's hard. And I'm maybe needed to give that a trigger warning, but I can't begin to express how much our lives really are hard. And that is the main thing that you will see autistic adults saying, is how much they've suffered. And you want to keep that in mind with everything that you do, and prevent that by telling them, yes, you have actual disability. That doesn't mean that you can't do things that you want. It means that we're not going to make you do the things that everybody else is doing, because you're probably really good at some other things that people might think are weird or different. Yes, it's weird to other 5-year-olds if your kid is obsessed with, black holes or entomology, insects. But then that person might become like a world-renowned entomologist and be amazing at it. And that's what they always wanted to do because it's passion for them. And so you want to help them love themselves and know themselves. That should be your main goal.
Yeah, we need to drop I call it the gut it out method, right? Because you can teach somebody to gut it out, but what are you doing for them and their existence? You know, I guess, and Emily Vick asked a good question. What should we approach, or what approach would you suggest for things that are aversive in the environment, like that you can't avoid? You know, I mean, I guess everything can be kind of, you can modify things, but what do you do if they are things that are in the everyday environment that you can't always, opt out of? Does that question make sense?
Yes. So, like a classroom has a bell that many autistic people will find absolutely torturous. Hyperacusis is a real thing. That's when, and misophonia, which is when you have an aversion to certain sounds like chewing sounds. Those are real. They have neurological grounding, and they can be traumatic for kids. We have an article about a child who, at all times, they were so afraid of a fire alarm that they could think of nothing else ever in school. They could not hear a word their teacher said because at all times they were just thinking about how much it was going to hurt when that fire alarm went off. And when I privately talked to that person, they said that as school shootings and rumors of them became common in their school, they were far more afraid every time of the fire alarm going off because that's how aversive that was to them. So they're going to have aversives in their environment. And that's when you start thinking about things like getting them some ear defenders. And you start telling their teachers, hey, you need to teach your classes about sensory differences. And you need to talk about and normalize from grade school, from preschool, sensory differences, because those things are actually real. I see a lot of behaviorists saying sensory processing disorder is not real. And it is. I have a 0.1 percentile auditory processing. They played, when I was tested, they played 4 words, 2 in the left ear and 2 in the right, and asked me to say them in order. And out of 60, I got 60 incorrect. My left and right brain aren't communicating. Later, I got a genetics test, and it says, hey, you have insufficient corpus callosum. That's that bridge between your left and right brain. So I have multiple brains. They don't communicate very quickly with each other. These are real neurological differences, not just behavior. You can't understand them through your own lens because you don't have those neurological differences. When I see somebody, when I see people kiss in public or they're cuddling, I start feeling like my gut instinct is like, oh, leave them alone. Stop attacking them, because it just looks gross to me. That's an aversive to me. So, but that's just my wiring, and I have to logic, hey, some people are wired to like certain things that I don't like. But you need to understand those things are real. As an adult, I got convinced that my dad was a pedophile by doctors. My dad was not. I had no reason to think that, but it was because I'm touch averse. And I can't, and my body language and my stims, they would think that I was showing signs of sexual abuse. So lots and lots of times, and I would tell them I have a hard time at doctor's appointments because it's too many people right up close to me touching me. I've always been that way since my earliest memories. And so they convinced me it must have been my dad. And I went 10 years needing my parents badly, not knowing I was autistic, but being very, very, very much autistic, and not even having my family because I was convinced that my dad must have made me that way. No, these are neurological differences that happen in a lot of autistic people, and we just need to learn about them so that we don't accidentally traumatize our kids for life.
I'm a little bit speechless, and I feel like we could start part 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 on this topic, but I want to be respectful of your time, Terra, that it's 3:10 and I'm happy to keep going, but I think this highlights for all of us behavior analysts on here, and just I so appreciate the autistic advocates that joined us. I think we need these discussions. We've got to keep languaging together so that we can move forward together, rather than separate. So I just I just so appreciate this conversation.
Thank you for having me, and thank you. This is an amazing audience, and I think that you have a lot of challenges with your field. Looking at your ethics code, it says, and these are recent edits that made it even more colonized, that say scientific evidence. Well, we've been cut out of evidence. We create, I can have 100,000 autistic people respond to social media posts saying, yes, this is so true for me. And you can have in your field almost everything that's in your evidence base is single case design studies. Literally, they're expensive anecdotes that usually go against, or often go against, what the majority are saying, but that has structural privilege behind it, right? So we say, I have this research paper. Well, yeah, we do have research, but it doesn't say specifically autistic people, blah, blah, blah. We have research that shows that some people have sensory differences because of this part of the brain. That takes more work than just having, 3 kids wore a weighted vest in class and they still STEM, so weighted vests are ineffective. That's not really a research base. So that's a thing that you're going to have to contend with your field on, because the goals, and for insurance companies, the goals you need to write are kind of ableist by design. And the goals, your ethics code tells you that your goals have to be about behavior change. And yes, you can work your way around that, but your goal shouldn't always be about behavior change. It should often be about validation and helping them get to know themselves. So to write goals that insurance companies are going to not frown on, you're going to have to be really creative and work with some autistic consultants too. Like there's some in this chat, Asiatu is amazing. There's some autistic BCBAs who are working on reform, looking at maybe kind of shifting behaviorism more into a Montessori style approach that focuses more on modifying environments than behaviors. And those kinds of things are great. So you just work with those people who are leading the charge on that too. I would love to come back. You all are a great crowd. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is a very special group of behavior analysts. I feel like we're all in that camp of wanting to move the fields forward in a direction with a massive listening ear. So I think we would all love to continue to learn. And I learned way more today than I expected to, which is something that I keep seeing in the chat. Everybody's saying I've learned so much more, and the perspective is just incredible. So thank you, Terra. And thank you everybody who came and joined us. I think it was just a great step forward for all of us, hopefully.
Thank you. And please go out and find some, when you're finding autistic advocates, find those ones who don't just post the things that are all about speaking autistics or white autistics. Make sure that you are finding the people who represent lots of intersections in the community. Hire them to do your CEUs. Like there are so many people who are better at this than I am, too. So yeah, hire them to do your CEUs with you. Put money in their tip jars for their educational efforts, for all that emotional labor they put in, because they do it for free every day. Oh, it's another thing. Reinforcement. We always have people asking us, would you do work for free? Yeah, I work about 20 hours a day, 365 days a year for free. I'm not exaggerating at all. I do this all day, every day for free. So like, we have different motivations. But yeah, learn from autistics. And thank you. I would love to come back. Reach out to NeuroClastic if you want to do more CEUs, and I can hook you up. We just signed on a chief decolonizing officer onto our executive team. So Jude is amazing. Gotta get, we'll hook you up.
Yeah, if you have a platform for this, please let's keep these rolling. And Terry, you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you so much. I would love to come back.
Good. Well, we loved it. So, all right, you guys, I think we're going to sign off. Feel free to fill out the CEU form. It sounds like I made a mistake on the date on the form, but I'm pretty sure the date on the certificate is correct. If it's not, you guys are always welcome to email me if we think it's going to be an issue. So very, very special thanks to Terra. Thanks for putting yourself out there, and everybody in the chat. Just thank you guys. Just the best.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
See you all.